Welcome to Manager Tools. This is Sarah.
And this is Kate.
Today's cast, The Hidden Purpose of Interviewing, External Validation, Part 1 of 2.
The questions this cast answers are, what is the purpose of effective interviews? Why should everyone go through the same interviewing process? And how can I increase new hires' effectiveness through the interviewing process?
If you want answers to these questions and more, keep listening. Pardon my interruption, but we now host an effective executive workshop designed to help your organization build a strategic plan. Send us a note to customer service at manager-tools.com if you'd like to learn more. Now, on to the show.
So, interviewing, hiring, some of our favorite topics. But when we talk about interviewing, most people understand that the primary purpose of interviewing is selecting the right candidate. And interviewing is the best process we know to do that, especially behavioral interviewing. It doesn't, though, always seem that people understand that that's not all that interviews do.
Yeah.
Interviews are also supposed to confer upon hired candidates the trust of the organization. A process trusted by many people in the organization, or the organization as a whole even, would be great. But a process trusted by all, let's say, will lead to faster effectiveness for newly hired candidates. And it should be a fair, known, challenging, and respectful process in order to do this.
Absolutely. So we're going to cover several things in today's what's probably a longer than normal cast. We're going to start by talking about the fact that your interview process must be your interview process. Then the interview process must confer organizational trust on new hires. The process must be fair, must be known, must be challenging, and must be conducted with respect. So first, let's start with the fact that your interview process must be your interview process. And I think of all of the parts of this, in my opinion, I suppose, this is the lesser known, I think, to many managers that I talk to. Now, folks, a quick note before we get into these recommendations based on over 250,000 interviews. You're going to note that we didn't title each of these recommendations just interview processes must be whatever that thing is. We instead titled them your interview process must be this thing. And when you're hiring, remember, it's always your interview process. If you're a manager or a senior manager or a director or a senior director, if you're even a vice president or you're a general manager, you're the CEO of the company, one of the most strategically important contributions that you can make to your organization is the caliber and quality of your new hires. And we cannot say it strongly enough. Simply accepting whatever HR says the interview process is short-sighted, and it's not a successful strategy to ensuring the long-term success of your organization.
Mm-hmm. And we talk about this, the idea of strategic implications of hiring, that in many cases, the people whom you hire might outlast you in the organization. You are affecting the organization for years to come when you hire. And the thing that always gets me the most is when people say things like, oh, I don't have time for an interview today, or I don't have time to do this. It is so short-sighted that people would suggest that 4 hours to spend on this process, like in the actual process, the interviewing and the interview results capture, is too much time when you consider the fact that this person might work here for 5, 10, 15 years. And to go back to your comment about HR, even though in the past we have maybe offended HR, in this case, we mean no offense to HR. In many cases, there are super smart HR people who are out there building reasonable systems for interviewing. We know a few of them. And even if that's true, HR is almost always understaffed, and they rarely, if ever, build complete and detailed processes for hiring. It's not always the case that you're going to have an HR team that does this, does it well, does it from top to bottom. Further, and I think this is really crucial, they simply don't have the bandwidth if your organization is big enough to have HR. They don't have the bandwidth to know everything that your team needs. Like, not only will there be slightly different processes across the organization, and that's something then that makes HR's job harder, there's also the fact that they can't know enough about the specific job. So when, there's this question about, well, can they use this skill instead of that skill? HR doesn't know that.
No, they don't. And they can't know that, to your point.
No.
Could they know that about a coder and a salesperson and a engineer? And there's no way.
Right. And they might have one area where they're aware, maybe it's their background, et cetera. But other than that, it's not fair for us to expect them to understand the subtleties of all of the jobs involved in our organization. And that requires the manager, who's the closest person to the job, who can make decisions, because you have to have both, right? You have to be close to the job and be able to make decisions. It requires the manager to be involved.
Yes. More than, to your point, we want to be sometimes.
Yes.
Because we think we don't want to have to waste the time.
Yeah.
And the whole thing causes, let's call it, problems for the future of our organization.
For sure, especially, and problems for ourselves. So the interviewing, training processes, systems that HR sets up really probably can't keep up with all the changes, all the things that are going on. And so again, it's unreasonable, I would suggest, to think that HR would be deeply involved enough in the process to get you what you need specifically. So we're not going to hold them to that standard.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And folks, there are other reasons that interviewing needs to become your process, not one where you simply blindly follow another person's recommendations. First, because HR, for example, typically focuses on sourcing of candidates. Despite the proliferation of online sites and LinkedIn, sourcing is still an incredibly important part of this process. And the sourcing piece by itself, in many cases, is a full-time job unto itself. This goes back to the unreasonable expectations we have for HR, because they're already looking for sources of talent, which leaves them very little time to create an entire process, start to finish, for every single manager that exists within your organization. And frankly, far too many organizations are outsourcing their talent sourcing to recruiters, which is something that you can change and absolutely should change and influence and impact. We'll talk more about that in the future portion of this guidance. But yeah, taking a more active role yourself in the recruitment as well for HR, if that's who does it for you, or an outside consultant, will also benefit your hiring process as well.
Oh, man. I saw a commercial recently. In fact, I saw it yesterday twice. They actually say out loud at the beginning of the commercial that hiring is a lonely process. And also, they've got this woman sitting at a desk and she's frozen. She's like on a tundra alone at a desk. Okay. It's ironic that it would be a lonely process, given that you're actually handling people through the process. And the company that they're promoting, of course, is recruitment and all that. And
yeah,
I thought to myself, not only does it not have to be, it shouldn't be. And it's interesting that I'm hearing so many things from people that it's hard to get hired. And then I'm also hearing from the other side, oh, it's really hard to hire. So everybody's looking for something and they're not matching up. But okay, so that was a complete segue. Let's go back to why it needs to be your process. There's another reason. And it's because you're the one who has to live with the result of your process.
You want your management life to be easy? Hire better.
Seriously, HR is not going to have to handle the fact that you hired the wrong guy. We cannot overstate this. If hiring is the single most strategic contribution every manager makes to her organization, and by the way, it is, how can you leave the creation, adaptation of your hiring process to someone else? How can you do it? Not only is it strategically super, super, super important. You're going to have to handle this person. It's not a question of what's going to happen 5 years down the road, although I bet because we talk about how, okay, if you get the wrong guy in, guess what? They stay forever.
Yeah.
It's not just that. It's also the fact that this person is going to work with your team, work with you or not, depending on how well you hire. Y'all, we do think that you should listen to HR. We believe it's important to have a good relationship with your HR business partner. Go down there, make a friend, use whatever guidance and resources they provide to help you with your system, which you use to hire and bring people onto your team and your organization. It's got to be yours, because the only people who are going to have to suffer if you don't do this well are the people, well, not the only people, but 90% of the suffering will be yours and your directs.
Yes, that's exactly. It'll be yours to bear. So you want to make sure it goes well.
Yeah.
And folks, finally, when hiring guidance is rightly under the purview of HR, it is conducted by managers. Therefore, it falls under the mistaken, commonly held belief that hiring is part of one's own management style. And we have railed against this idea, this galactically stupid idea, I think Mark would say if he were here, for years. There is no style adjustment for managing any more than there's a style for security or finance or strategy or accounting or customer capture or customer relationships. Companies have systems for important activities. You don't get to buck the system. You don't get to go to the CFO that establishes the accounting processes for the organization and tell them that you have your own style and prefer it to the corporate accounting system. Or you have your own style.
You can.
You can.
And then you have to go find another job.
Find a new job. Mm-hmm. You're the problem. So you can go. Exactly. You can't go, oh, my style for expense management is taking you a brown paper bag full of greasy receipts once every couple of months and getting cash, if you don't mind. You can say that. You'll be laughed out of the room.
I want mine in doubloons.
Exactly. There are some things that are required as part of working in an organization. We'll call it a tax you pay for being a member of this organization. And this is one of the taxes you pay.
Yeah. So our point is that you don't get to think, you get to think, but don't rely upon your thought that you get to have a personal style regarding interview process or conducting individual interviews. It doesn't work also. Another thing that doesn't work, panel interviews. Panel interviews are idiotic. They don't work. They never have. They never will. And whoever came up with them never tested them, which we did for years to show that they worked, because they don't.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, it's your process. Make it yours by building it based on the data. Make it yours by reviewing your process. Make it yours by building and then training your people on how to use it. Make it yours, make it theirs by insisting on professional rigor in its application. And because you'll hire better, and that will increase your chances of getting promoted, where you can then teach it to new parts of your organization that you're now responsible for after your promotion. And then when you get to be chief executive, then you can insist that the HR component and line managers use your system. So what we're suggesting, y'all, is that it is not okay for one person to go rogue in an interview and decide that they're going to ask questions like, if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? Because again, I'm absolutely sure that doesn't have anything to do, unless you're an arborist. Okay.
Different, maybe.
Maybe. Although, again, since your job as an arborist is not to be a tree, that question holds no value in predicting your success in doing the job, because, again, you're not a tree. Or the one that always gets me, that's like, if you have a fox and a chicken and an elderly person and one rowboat that doesn't fit them all, what should you do? Have you not heard this one?
I don't think I've heard that one, no.
It's friends in my personal life send me this stuff all the time that they see it. It's like, it's an interview question. That is, if you have a rowboat and you have to get it across the river,
Sure.
the proverbial river, and you also have to get across the river a fox, a chicken, and an elderly person, but they don't all fit.
Simultaneously.
Right.
They do not fit.
What would you do?
Can you stack them? You know what? I don't think it matters. I feel like the question is just, yeah.
Well, yeah, I think there's something inherently, the inherent assumption that you can't put the fox and the chicken in together, and that like the fox or chicken will run away. Friends. And again, since I don't think that anyone listening to this podcast is interviewing someone for rowboating livestock and elderly people, the question doesn't predict success in the job. So please don't ask it. Like, or what color are you blue?
I mean, this goes back to your comment earlier, Kate. People gripe about the amount of time the hiring process takes. And then during that little time that they're using, they're wasting it
with chickens
on non-valuable things. Exactly. Asking questions that don't have useful answers. So if you don't want to waste time, stop wasting it and don't ask dumb questions.
I don't know how many people have ever tried to catch a chicken. It's quite difficult.
Yeah, it is. They're terrifying.
It's so bad. I do not enjoy chickens. Every time somebody here in Austin says, "Oh, I want to get a chicken."
You've never had a chicken friend.
It's so funny because I think a lot of people are talking about getting chickens now. For the record, y'all, chickens don't lay eggs forever and they don't lay them consistently. Like if you get a chicken, they might take 6 months off. Then they do it again. Please don't go out and buy chickens, y'all.
Eggs are very expensive though. I understand.
Yes, and
I understand the desire.
Right. We're here to tell you it's not worth it.
I just can't help myself from interrupting y'all today and letting you know about the M Conference, our executive event where you can accelerate your development by learning from executives in the Manager Tools community. This 2-day event is packed with networking events and engaging sessions where you'll learn from top leaders in a variety of industries as they share their thoughts on leadership, managing, and more. This one-of-a-kind event is being held in Los Angeles, October 8th and 9th, 2025. And you can learn more about it by visiting us online at manager-tools.com and finding information about the M Conference under our training and events menu. We hope to see you there. Now, on to the show.
Okay. We're back to our regularly scheduled programming about your interview process.
Right. So, going back to the fact that we all know the purpose of interviewing is selecting the right candidate. Also, though, your interview process must confer organizational trust on your new hires. External validation is the second most important principle of the interviewing process, right after this hiring the right candidates effectively and efficiently. What we mean when we say external validation is that your interview process should be so impressive and so complete that new hires gain trust from the rest of the organization just for having gone through it and been successful. And the way you do that is by building a hiring process that includes the 4 components that we're going to describe in this portion of this podcast. Those components are fair, known, challenging, and respectful.
Having gone through the process and being brought into a group where other people went through the same process and know of its rigor and know what happens confers upon the new person the same level of respect that the other people feel they deserve for having gone through the process. So, okay, thought exercise. We're going to examine this idea by thinking about instead, what if you don't have an interview process at all? Let's say a director hires a friend of his outside of whatever general process presently exists. And this is the very definition of no process at all.
Yeah, if some people can get around it, it's not a process.
Right. Some people go through some process, but others, for all kinds of reasons, don't go through that process or any process. The director may justify it on the basis of speed and cost. And when this is done, the director is missing the critical component of external validation or trust conferring that a candidate gets from going through the process. And if you've seen this before, and I would wager that a lot of people have, what people say behind the scenes is, oh, yeah, he got hired because he's so-and-so's friend. And that is it's seen as a negative for sure.
You're absolutely right.
It's used as it's not a slur. Slur is a strong word. But
it's disparaging, certainly.
For sure.
That person might be very good, but no one thinks that's why they got hired.
Exactly. It would be like if a quality inspector says to the plant manager, hey, we don't have to test this vendor's shipments. He's a friend of mine. I've worked with him before. The shipments will be fine. Y'all, if you've ever worked in manufacturing or a high quality manufacturing organization, you know this is insanity. If you haven't worked in this environment, y'all, you would be shocked at the number of parts that come in that don't work, or the number of times there isn't another supplier. And so you almost have to put up with stuff that is broken or useless or bad. I was actually just talking to somebody about this, a person who is in manufacturing now. We were talking about my time. There was a time in my previous job where there was only one supplier of this particular part, and they were struggling. And we were refurbishing all of those parts every single time they came in because we couldn't even get them from anywhere else. This was in a very high stakes situation, millions and millions of dollars on the line. So everybody who has ever been in this environment knows you have to test everything. There's no guarantee ever. Somebody could be providing quality parts for 20 years and then some snafu, some sourcing issue happens and suddenly it doesn't work. It's simply not done. In fact, a lot of quality groups send their team out to their vendors' manufacturing facilities to test the products they buy and the quality of the manufacturing that's happening on site elsewhere. It's not enough to test your own stuff. You got to test everybody else's stuff too, because hey, guess what? You'd be shocked by how much stuff out there doesn't work.
Right.
Honestly, every time I think about it, I can't even remember. It was an electrical component. And I just remember there was a morning in the summer where somebody said, we got another shipment. I was like, oh man, you got to go down there. And you open the box knowing it would be like opening every Amazon box you've ever gotten and knowing that what you ordered wasn't going to work. And you had to fix it. You can't send it back. Good luck.
Good luck.
It happens all the time, right?
Yeah. And when you talk manufacturing, when you look at it that way, it seems so obvious that having these go around behind for the friend, not have to do QA on this shipment, it is completely nonsensical and doesn't make any sense. Yet, it happens all of the time when it comes to hiring processes. And you can't blame other people in the organization. It's usually lower managers. We can't just get our friends in, right? The same way the director can. And lower managers in the organization see it and wonder why there's one process for them and another process for the friends of the director. And the director, of course, in this case, argues that they've known this person for years and knows what they can do. And it is certainly more efficient, given the fact that they know this person, that our organization doesn't have to go through all of the work and effort involved in hiring. They should just come quickly in the back door.
Yeah. And okay, we understand people struggle when they're hiring. They really want speed. They do. And I don't know that this is always about speed as much as it is about getting out of the process. People don't want to go through this process. So fine. Okay. The speed of the hiring process, though, belies the bigger process of getting the new hire ready to do work. So getting them up to speed, if you will, quickly. The lack of trust conferred on the new hire.
The mistrust conferred on the new hire.
Yeah. Means that he or she will have to prove themselves with everyone internally over and over and over again, which slows down the effort to get things done. It makes it harder for them to get things done because they lack the trust needed, because no trust is conferred upon them without a process. So the people in the organization, the existing employees, withhold trust because, of course, they do. Why would they give it away freely, despite all guidance from the hiring director that, hey, then this new guy is awesome? Because why would they believe that? Instead, imagine that several of the director's team interviewed the candidate, recommended hiring. They saw and heard about this person's performance, and then they went through an overall hiring and onboarding process that was rigorous. Hey, guess what? Then the trust conferred on this person when they first get in is pretty high. It's not zero, which is what it is when it's just a buddy, right? And now this person has this like level up. They can start getting stuff done pretty much right away. And what is basically happening is instead of saying like, oh yeah, he's the new director's friend or he's the director's guy, the people who put the candidate through the process are going around telling other people, oh, I interviewed her. She's excellent. She's going to make a difference. I had a fabulous experience with her. And it's this mechanism that confers trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Folks, a hiring process that is fair and known and challenging and respectful is kind of the equivalent to building a wall around your existing team. Your team feels protected from weak candidates and bad hires by a process that meets these strict and rigorous criteria. And compared to the vast majority of other managers' processes, which again is basically no process at all, it doesn't just feel like a wall. This wall that you've built feels a little bit more like a wall with a moat around it that is filled with alligators, and there are archers on the parapets. That's kind of what it feels like, because you're comparing it to the fact that no one else has any walls. They're just letting all their buddies in. Further, having no process turns off highly qualified candidates from applying to your firm. So take the example of the director, the one that Kate just outlined. We wouldn't call that a process, but let's assume that's the process. The new hire can tell their friends, oh, it's easy to get hired over here. I can just put in a good word for you. We'll just walk you through the back door. It's how I got here. But remember, maybe the director has the ability to tell whether or not this new hire is going to be good. They've worked with them before. But does the new hire have that ability too? Are all of the new hires friends of quality? No, not necessarily. We dispute, frankly, given the fact that they just came in the back door. They themselves aren't really a quality candidate. But now what we've done is we've shown our new hire and everyone else in the organization, hey, there's a loophole here. We can get you in the back door. Don't worry about it. It's not that hard to work here. So they tell all of their other friends who probably don't work that hard, hey, you should apply. You should totally try and work here. No. Floodgates open. A bunch of people that you don't want to hire are now super interested.
And the issue is then that all these people that are interested are not quality. And so the quality candidate thinks to themselves, well, if it's easy to get hired there, it can't be that great. There's prestige at certain organizations, and those organizations make it very clear that you can't just walk right in. And additionally, if you have a comprehensive process, it's an enormous turnoff for questionable candidates. Effective hiring processes result in more no's than yeses. And all the candidates that are turned down tell their friends that it's difficult getting hired over there. And okay, they're probably hanging out with other non-high performers. And then this keeps lower quality candidates from applying, which means they're self-selecting out. It's good for managers considering that their hiring process then projects external validation. The wall and the moat and the gators and the archers send a message. Lesser performers, don't waste your time or ours trying to come in here.
Exactly. Last week when I was traveling, I had, in the exact same day, 2 completely opposite conversations with different executives about hiring. The first conversation I had It's a well-known tech company. I was talking to her and she talked about the fact that she's hiring a brand new team. First time in her career, she gets to handpick her team, but she's having such a hard time finding candidates. She's got so many applications. She's being flooded with applications, but none of them are good candidates. So then later in that same day, I was having a meeting with another technology executive in a different firm who is also hiring. And so I'd asked him about his experience in the current market. Are they getting a flood of resumes? Are they having a hard time finding good candidates? And his representation of his situation was completely the opposite. No, because we are only hiring people and have been hiring people for years with a very strict and rigorous process. We don't get that many applications, and the ones we get are all excellent. So if we get 5 people apply, the problem we have is figuring out which of those 5 people is the best of those 5 people because they're all exceptional and would be great for working here. But that's kind of the difference. 2 people, same day, same type of organization, completely different experience as it pertains to hiring. One hires often and a lot of people without a very strict process. And the other one hires with a very strict process and completely different experiences.
Yeah. It says what we've been saying for a long time, that a challenging, comprehensive hiring process not only turns off bad potential candidates, it encourages good potential candidates. Good candidates know that by definition, the best organizations are hard to get hired into. And they want to know, just like the existing employees, that there will be a wall and a moat and gaiters and archers protecting them once they're on the inside. Like once you get hired, you don't want to interview a lot of lousy candidates who think this is like all the other firms. It's not enough to have some process that makes good hires. An effective hiring process does that and confers external validation to the process and internal trust to the hired candidate. And without a process, none of that's happening. Thanks, everybody. That's it for this week. We'll be back next week with a continuation of this topic.